What is your I don't get paid enough for this crap moment? I have a mildly irrational fear of spiders. I was asked to help clean out an old storage area / shed type building. It was covered in dust and a ton of these big black spiders, but a big enough space that I felt fine. Until my supervisor handed me a leaf blower and asked me to go through a back hallway with it. Opened the door to the hallway and it was cramped, just tall enough to be a little over my height and just wide enough for me to walk through. Except there was no light, so it was pitch black until I held up my phone flashlight and saw the largest mess of tangled webs filled to the absolute brim with thousands of the big black spiders. Straight up refused to walk down that thing, especially with a leaf blower. Like no thanks, I don't want to create a spider tornado. My supervisor was irritated with me that I refused to do this, but I would rather be fired than walk through the arachnid hell hallway for $10 an hour. Fishmonger in a grocery store. We got a large number of lobsters in, soft shelled and already dying. So my manager decided we could at least sell their tails. Apparently lobsters don't really have a central nervous system, so when you sever the tails and put their tails on ice they freaking run away. So I had to chase these tails down because they've escaped into the rest of the display case, onto the floor, and hidden under our prep tables. Never again. I'm a public librarian. I was helping someone in the computer room and turned to tell someone he needed to keep his exclamations at the video he was watching down. Just then, the woman I was helping leapt aside because the man I was shushing pissed himself. It ran down onto the jacket he had tied around his waist, down the chair, onto the ground. Turns out he'd snuck in alcohol and was totally blackout drunk. I told him he had to leave. He put the piss-covered jacket on and stumbled out. As I returned with gloves and cleaning supplies, another patron decided this was a good time to complain about some kids who were making noise. I took a deep breath and said, "This is a good time for us all to appeal to our higher selves and do our best in the moment. Please just adapt for a minute." Then I thought about the student loans I took out for the master's degree as I scrubbed up piss. I was a manager for a well-known lingerie store. Our location was in a failing suburban mall. The store was giant and shaped oddly. There were dressing rooms in odd hidden corners and a few blind spots. The store was located at the end of the mall next to other stores no one really went to, so there wasn't much foot traffic. We were also always short-staffed because no one wanted to work out there. All of those factors made us a prime location for thieves and weirdos. I would have to do laps around the store due to its layout, and I would regularly come across people doing sex stuff in this one secluded little dressing room. The dressing room was in a sort of alcove and was the least visible spot in the store, so it was prime real estate for all kinds of shenanigans. It ranged from women doing strip teases for men, to catching couples having oral sex, to catching couples having penetrative sex, to catching men masturbating. The final straw was catching a man at closing time, masturbating into a pile of cotton panties with the dressing room door wide open. I couldn't take it anymore. I put in my notice the next day. And what was crazy was that corporate always shrugged or laughed it off when I would call and complain that we needed a security guard. I was 21 at the time, and every woman that worked there was between 19 to 30. It was a safety issue, and they'd also blame us for all the merchandise theft, which we were unable to prevent because there weren't enough bodies in that gigantic store to prevent it. I was also dating a guy who also worked in the mall, and he told me that they finally closed up that one dressing room not long after I left. He said a lot of folks were pissed because apparently that one little dressing room was a well-known open secret spot for hooking up. Working at a large chain retail store, come across a spot of crap in the toy aisle. Oh, look, a mess for me to clean. And what's that over yonder? Another one not far away. Nice little trail of brown nuggets left behind and leading me on the worst scavenger hunt ever all the way across the store to the bathrooms. What do I find waiting for me inside? The mothership turd, sitting proudly in a small heap on the floor in the corner, merely a few feet away from an actual, factual, functioning toilet. Turns out a kid was in the toy aisle with their parent and couldn't hold it in any longer, followed by a mad dash to the bathroom. My supervisor literally said they felt bad for me and I didn't get paid enough by corporate. Raise? No $5 gift card? Yeah. Same place. Also came in for a routine bathroom check. Go into the stall and find shit on the wall. The strange part? It's at shoulder height and streaking down the wall like crap mascara from the stall crying after whatever it was had been done. I have no clue what happened, and to this very day, I still like to imagine someone doing a handstand inside this tiny stall and blasting a butt nugget against the wall. When I was 20 I had 3 jobs. I worked as a bank teller from 8 to 4, then as a closing shift manager at a coffee shop from 5 to 10, then as an overpass janitor from 11 to 2 am. This wasn't every day, but it was enough that it equated to about 80 hours a week between the 3 jobs. And yes, you can imagine this would lead to burnout real fast. So at the overpass janitor gig my boss comes over to me and asks me to come to the office for a review. This was weird. All I did was mop floors on a production line that made air train brakes. But whatever. I go into his office and he closes the door behind me and pulls out a gay porn magazine and starts asking me about different dicks and put his hand on my shoulder. I was surprisingly calm and just said I don't like dicks and went back to work. Then it hit me what happened. I called in sick the rest of the week and picked up my final paycheck when he wasn't there. It was a hard enough job without being sexually harassed for $8.50 an hour. I worked for a small college. The president's secretary thought that most things were above her pay grade, and at one of the busiest times of the year for my office decided that I should put in 80+ hours to clean her data and get something she needed done. After getting it finished she decided that she wanted the whole thing changed. I broke down. I went to the doctor in the midst of a full-blown panic attack and was given a note for 2 weeks off work, which meant they had to use what I did or do it themselves. I came back to work and resigned. I used to be a counselor at a methadone clinic. Had a client who was going to prison for slitting the throats of his ex-wife's beloved Rottweilers because I couldn't kill her and it was the best way to hurt her. The day he was supposed to go to prison, he showed up at the clinic after dosing hours, demanding his dose. He was no longer on the clinic, so legally, there was no way to do this. I stood behind the counter and tried to explain the situation to him. He grew more and more irate and then called his lawyer and put me on the phone with him. His lawyer explained dude didn't show up for prison, was now a fugitive, and had pulled a knife on his own sister in her car just outside my clinic. So, dude had a knife. Lawyer told me not to piss dude off. He was violent and to call the cops. By this point, every other therapist and office worker had moseyed the freak out. So, I told the lawyer thanks, hung up the phone and moseyed the freak out of the front office, and called the cops from the break room. Dude hopped over the counter and trashed the place and left. The bosses asked why I didn't stay and make sure he didn't trash the place. I explained they paid me $10.50 an hour and refused my raise. I was the only man in the building and was left alone with an armed violent felon. Freak their stuff. Manager at a grocery store I worked in my teens refused to pay the waste management bill for several months. When they finally came and emptied the dumpster, there were still mounds of trash laying about around the area. He had me go out and clean all of it up alone. I didn't have any protective gear or supplies whatsoever and was out in 100+ degree weather. I was only given a bunch of trash bags to put it into, and when I went in to ask for help, I was just given a shovel. I worked one more day after that, and after just being given more work to do without so much as a good job or thanks, I never went back. Bagging groceries at a major supermarket. The manager came over to tell me that I needed to clean up the bathroom. An elderly gentleman fell off the toilet while pooping, and it was a literal crap show. Apparently I was the most qualified, because I was 16. I was handed a broom and a dustpan. I crap you not, sorry had to. My reward for going above and beyond the call of duty? $5 in store coupons. Sometimes dreams really do come true. First day at the health department. I'm left at the reception desk alone, while literally everyone else in the office went out to a farewell lunch for the person I was replacing. As I was on 90-day probation, wasn't yet licensed and badged, my pay was $7.96 per hour. I'm sitting at reception, and some redneck comes in with a leaking garbage bag and drops it on my desk. It contains a newly beheaded javelina head. His buddy had been bitten, and it needed to be tested for rabies as soon as possible. I had no freaking clue what to do with a leaking garbage bag of javelin ahead. He couldn't wait for others to return, so he left a number and split. Turns out, we don't do that sort of thing at the health department. Guy refused to come back. I worked for a summer camp one year that was run by a stereotypically hippie-dippy organization. Now, I personally support this organization, but they had some ridiculous idea about how to discipline children. In that they didn't believe in discipline at all. No timeouts, no raising your voice, even just to be heard. No rewards to be earned or positive reinforcement. No loss of privileges. No warnings. No speaking to the parents about behavioral issues. Nothing. Now, most of the kids were coming to this camp because their parents didn't have the means to send them to more expensive camps, and quite a lot of them had behavioral issues to start with. But none of the kids were monsters. In fact, they were all pretty great. They mostly just needed some understanding and solid boundaries. Unfortunately, with no discipline comes no boundaries, or at least no way to enforce boundaries. So the kids tended to run amok and there wasn't a whole lot we as counselors could do. So I surreptitiously gave a few timeouts to some of the more wild kids, and guess what? Their behavior immediately improved, and I never had trouble with them again. In fact, they had a better time because they weren't constantly getting into fights with their friends. But I guess the higher ups found out about it somehow and sat me down to talk about how you just need to talk to them, find out why they are behaving badly, and make them understand the correct way to behave. I knew why they were behaving badly. They were kids in a place away from their parent with no rules and no discipline. They were seeing what they could get away with. In the end, I basically ignored the higher ups. I wasn't getting paid enough to deal with kids all day without having any way of keeping a bit of control. Regardless, the only problem kids had already had their timeouts, and, like I said, they were fine once they knew where the line was. Besides, I wasn't worried about my job. They don't believe in discipline. Grocery store cashier. The customer was angry because her cereal had rung up wrong. I called a price check and this lady berated me the whole time. I recall that she accused me of trying to steal from her. Said she was going to get me fired. I looked at her and said, I make $7.25 per hour, no matter how much you pay for this cereal, so I do not give a shit how this situation turns out. She stared at me in shock. The price check comes back saying the price scanned correctly. Silence. I said, so do you want the cereal or not? She said, yes. And that was that. She did not complain to the manager.